On April 24th, the Lincoln Museum in Fort Wayne, Indiana, unveiled a temporary exhibit entitled Lincoln from Life as the Artist Saw Him. The displays include paintings, sculptures, and drawings of Lincoln from his election in 1860 to his assassination in 1865. Harold Holzer, guest curator for the exhibit, sat down with us to talk about the artwork and the stories behind each piece.
Has anything like this exhibit ever been done, and what is it?
I'll start by saying it's never been done. It's a gathering together of life portraits in sculpture and in painting and drawing for which Abraham Lincoln actually posed, for which he sat, and for which there were direct encounters between artist and subject. There are very few out there anyway. No more than 23 or so artists and sculptors encountered him during the 5 years of his national prominence. But this is the first time they've ever been gathered together in quantity.
So what kind of names are represented on these walls?
Probably names that we won't recognize immediately, because the great American artists of the day didn't feel like traveling, didn't quite think of Lincoln as a great subject. That changed after he died, of course. But well, we'll see people like Francis B. Carpenter, an upstate New Yorker who was inspired by the Emancipation Proclamation. We'll see sculptor Leonard Wells Volk, who was a relative of, by marriage, of Lincoln's arch rival in politics, Stephen Douglas, a Democrat who made his whole career on Abraham Lincoln. We'll see a young painter named Alban Jasper Conant, who wanted to make Lincoln look happy instead of dour. We'll see a young drawing teacher from Boston named Charles Alfred Barry, a Connecticut professional named Matthew Henry Wilson, Clark Mills, who did the famous equestrian sculpture of Andrew Jackson across the street from the White House in Lafayette Park, came and did a life mask of Abraham Lincoln a couple of months before he died. A few women, Sarah Fisher Ames and Vinnie Ream, both portrayed Lincoln. One of them is a teenager. And Edward Dalton Marchant, whose painting we're sitting in front of now, a Philadelphia artist, a venerable Philadelphia artist who had painted many presidents and was invited to do a Lincoln for Independence Hall.
When was that painting behind you done?
It was done in February of 1863, and it was in celebration of emancipation, so Marchant decided to dress him in a white tie and have a very fancy signing ceremony, which in fact didn't take place quite like that, certainly not in front of a Statue of Liberty with the shackles symbolically broken. But he wanted it to be very formal because this, after all, was going to hang in Independence Hall.
What was Abraham Lincoln's attitude about sitting?
Well, he had his public attitude, that is, what he told the artist was, don't fasten me into a chair, or you have to paint me on the jump, or I don't know why all you artists want my face unless it's the ugliest face in Illinois. So there was a lot of this bluff joking around about it. On the other hand, I don't think there was another president up to that time, including George Washington, who made himself so consistently available to artists and sculptors, who in those days took a lot of time to do this kind of work. I mean, you have to remember that it was not the days when there was an official White House photographer who could come in and do ceremonial occasions and record them for posterity. The sitter had to really commit to being there and being available and being still a lot of the times.
Abraham Lincoln was killed, he was how old?
He was 56, just 56. But as some of the last paintings indicate, he looked a great deal older. He aged, and the life masks, in fact, the Volk life mask and the Mills life mask, made only 5 years apart, practically to the month, show the aging, the 25-year aging process, so startling that his private secretary wrote that one is a young man, muscular and alive, and the other looks like a death mask.
Is the Mills life mask in this room?
Yes, it is.
So you have both the Volk, which was done what year again?
It was done in 1860, in March, and we have the February 1865 Mills.
And when was that done?
In the White House. But by then it was a simplified process. Mills had a new technique. And I think it was as simple as imagine putting a stocking over your face and then doing the life mask. So Lincoln didn't have any trouble getting it off his face. In fact, when he was told it was a life mask, he said, "Why don't you just stab me?" He remembered that what he endured 5 years before, and he didn't want to go through it again, but he didn't have to.
This sculpture right here?
This is one of the most interesting stories of the entire litany of Lincoln art experiences. Somehow this teenaged girl, 15, 16 years old, was brought to his attention by her many male admirers in Washington, senators who were just entranced by her. She had long not golden, but long flowing curls, and was very, very pretty. And she could sculpt a little, as her first effort in the White House shows. It was a medallion portrait that looks almost like a school project. And maybe it was, because this is how she was going to school. For some reason, Lincoln encouraged her, and she came back and did a fairly good bust, a large bust portrait that's in this show. And you could see from it that her style is getting more mature, but that she has a way to go before she develops fully.
Her name again?
Her name is Vinnie Ream. And this third attempt was the charm. She did a really wonderful sculpture. Just beautiful. And now she's all of 17. Lincoln dies. He gives her a little photograph of himself and signs it before they part. And she writes Abraham the Good on the back in her handwriting. It's a wonderful memento that's part of the permanent collection of the Lincoln Museum. Vinnie then hears about a competition to do a full-size heroic sculpture of Abraham Lincoln for the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol. And she decides to enter the competition. Well, all of a sudden, Mary Lincoln is heard from, who has been suppressing all of her hostility about these daily visits from this pretty young girl to the president's office, because she begins one of her famous letter-writing campaigns, trying to dissuade people from giving her a commission that's worth $10,000. It's a heck of a lot of money in 1865-66. She says nothing but the most mortifying failure can be anticipated, which will be a severe trial to the nation and the world. And she campaigns. But Vinnie has a better idea. She goes to the galleries of the Senate, where the debate is taking place over the commission, and wears a low-cut dress and leans over the gallery in a provocative manner while the senators are trying to pay attention to their work. So Mary writes, sort of conceding defeat, that she has no power to fight a sculptor who shows her busts in public. So Vinnie got the $10,000 and did the famous statue of Lincoln that now stands in the rotunda, and that's principally familiar to Americans as the figure that looms over the catafalques during funerals in the Capitol Rotunda. It's always right in front of the Lincoln statue. Vinnie was an amazing celebrity. She was painted, she was photographed, she was sculpted herself, and she was probably, of all of the artists in this room, she was the most famous in her time.